Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you're very welcome to the July garden tour. Now in this video we're going to have a look around my garden. My garden is an acre in size and I'm based in Wexford in Southern Ireland, which is about an hour's drive south of Dublin. And the garden, well, what can I say? We have had such a wet and horrible summer so far that you would think the garden would have suffered, but it hasn't really. A lot of things are looking amazing, so colourful, and a lot of things are flowering for a very long time. I'm guessing these are things that really would prefer a wetter climate than the climate change we've had in recent years has given rise to. So we're going to have a look around the garden today. We're going to have a look at what's doing well, and also I'm going to give you pointers on jobs to do now and a few little tips that I've learned about specific plants and how to deal them. So let's get on with the video. So we've started off here where the long border is, and I'm showing you this first because it is looking absolutely fabulous at the moment. Now if you wonder why this is called the long border, if you ever had to weed it in spring, you would know exactly what I mean by that, and it is looking fantastic at the moment. If we start over here on this side where it's a little bit shady from the shade cast by various trees including the fig tree, then we have things like podophyllum and myanthemum, hostas, some hardy orchids and a few foxgloves that are seeded there at the back. And if we migrate from that to the right, then we can see a lot of fantastic orange. That's the Peruvian lily, Alstroemeria oreana, and this one I absolutely love because it has such a fantastic vibrant colour and it holds itself upright, doesn't need any staking. We have the odd self-seeded poppy too, and the red of the poppy really kind of echoes the red and orange that's going on here in this border. A good indication of how wet it's been this year is the fact that this Ligularia is doing so well. The one with the tall yellow flower spikes there. Now this is a plant I was thinking of getting rid of because it just didn't do well for me. It needed more moisture. Well, look at it now. And of course geraniums are doing really well this year. At the front of the border here we have Anne Thompson, which is a fantastic, well, it's just a wonderful geranium and it's doing wonderfully this year. There are several bush salvias that are just doing so well for me this year, and this little fella is one of them, and I just love how it's kind of insinuated itself in among the grass, in with the Stipa tenuissima. I think the two together look fantastic. And just directly above it is this fantastic Hydrangeas. Now this is a variegated one. The foliage is yellow and green, but the flowers look really very much like other Hydrangeas flowers. Sunningdale, I believe, is the variety. And over here we have another geranium. Now this one is called Dragon's Heart, and the flowers, they're bigger than Anne Thompson. I am beginning to think that perhaps it's a better doer. And for my money, orange and purple together are just fantastic. And if we move down here a bit past the Dragon's Heart, we have this fantastic Alstroemeria. This is my favourite one with its gorgeous dark foliage. And then we have the scent of the regal lilies just pumping through the garden. It's absolutely wonderful. Another one of those fantastic bush salvias, just in glorious free flow of colour. So while the lilies are doing so well, and look, we have a little pink poppy here. I do like the ones that aren't red. Red is great, but it's great when you get the pinks mixed in. And you'll see this poppy here lying on the ground. Well, I guess we're at the stage now, it's before things need to be cut back. So in a bit the Hydrangeas will finish blooming and they'll need to be cut back. I do have an extensive video on that, which I link to at the end of this one. But we're kind of in the respite at the moment and we don't have to think about doing that work yet because the borders are just looking wonderful. One thing I will say is that my Monarda, and this is the glorious one called Cambridge Scarlet, has done less well this year, and I did divide this and move some bits around last autumn and perhaps that has impacted it a bit, but yeah, I think generally the Monardas aren't doing so well for whatever reason. And at the back we have the Hydrangeas, the tall pink one, which has decided this is the year where it needs to be staked. It's going to flop this year. So I guess that's just from the lush soil from all the rain. That is, the nicer the soil, the more likely many plants are to flop. In stony, dry soil, they will hold themselves upright better. And I guess that's what's coming into play with the Hydrangeas. So I guess at this time of year it's a good idea to keep an eye on things flopping, and if you can stake them before they flop, well, that's infinitely better than running out after the rain with your hoops and just trying to rectify something that's never going to look as good as it would have done if you'd staked it before it flopped. And while mostly this is looking really well, you will notice that I have a bit of a gap here, and I decided to fill it last year with this plant. Look! It bloomin' died. That is gone. Well, you know what? That was an expensive mistake because I bought it on the basis of what the label said. I'd never heard of the plant before and the label said it was hardy, and I planted it and guess what? Not hardy at all. And now for a little spotlight on this saxifrage. Yes, that white frothy flowery stuff behind the small box balls is a saxifrage stolonifera. And this one is commonly sold as a houseplant here in Ireland, but it's hardy outdoors. We can grow it outdoors, not a bother. Unlike many saxifrages, it's one that likes shade. So it's in the shade of this liquid amber tree here. And look what it rewards me with. These fantastic airy flowers look just wonderful in this spot. And here's another favourite alstroemeria of mine. This one is called Selena. And right behind Selena we have, well, we've got two plants here. So this one down below is Astilboides, used to be known as Rogersia, but it's now in its own genus, Astilboides, and it's got the big leaves and it has these kind of like droopy flowers, which I must say I never liked until this year. This year I liked them. I took some macro photography of the close-ups of the little kind of orangey pink balls, and I think it's actually quite gorgeous. They do go a kind of dirty colour after a bit, but you know what? That has its own attraction too. And behind that plant we have the Paulownia tree. This is the one that gets cut hard every spring and it rewards me with large leaves. Not exactly enormous this year, surprising considering the amount of water we've had, the amount of rain, but some of them are quite big, and I think the two together look great and they're a great backdrop to the alstroemeria. This plant is Cattleya, a relative of the Roscoa. And if any of your cherry blossom trees need a little bit of pruning, July is the month to do it. I will link at the end to a video showing you all about that, but they are a tree that needs to be pruned in summer. And of course, if you have box blight, or even if you don't, it's a good time to foliar feed your box balls. That's a spray that is put on top of the leaves and just gives them that bit of nutrition. Even if you don't have box blight like I do, it will help them fight it off. And now let's walk past the hydrangea over here where some sweet williams are looking really sweet. Sweet williams are a biennial plant. You sow them one year and they flower for you the next year. And what I really love about this old-fashioned favourite is that you can stick them in all of the spaces and gaps that you have in your garden. They hold themselves quite upright, not needing staking, and they seem to tolerate semi-shade as well as full sun. And the packet, the mix that I've grown, has a variety of colours from white to pink to red and some kind of bicoloured ones as well. And I think they just look stunning here in an area, a little spot where there was nothing else going on. I wasn't going to plant anything else here, and I stuck some of the sweet williams in, and hey presto, it looks fantastic. Now, many biennials are best sown in summer, and that's another great thing that I love because, you know, there's a bit of a lull in proceedings in the summer and you have time to sow a few seeds in June and July. And recently in the greenhouse I sowed more seed from sweet williams so that I can replace these ones when they start to look bad. Now, generally people root out sweet williams after their second year, but they can go for several years. They're a perennial plant. They just mightn't look as good the third and the fourth year, but we'll see. I'm certainly not going to rip these guys out anytime soon because they're just looking fantastic. So my top tip to you now is to sow some sweet williams, and while you're at it, sow a few foxglove seeds too. You can't be without foxgloves. They are fantastic. And here's another variety of sweet william. This one's called Sooty. And let's have a little glance at the entrance to this section of the garden. This particular Hemeracalis or daylily is doing well. It's called Rocket City and it's flowering well. However, I do notice that this year some of the other varieties just aren't opening properly. It's like they don't have enough energy from the sun or something to open properly. And the flowers just seem to rot in bud form, not ever having had the chance to show you their real beauty. Geranium Johnston's Blue looking great, and the mock oranges just finished. This variety did okay this year, but over the other side, oh my goodness, it's like they didn't even bother. Up at the top of this path, where I have plugged a few more gaps with the trusty old sweet williams, we have my main display of Alstroemeria oreana. Did you think my main display was down there in the long border? Not at all. Over here we've a lot more, I suppose, primary colours. We have the orange or red of the Alstroemeria in the foreground. In the mid distance over there we have the blue of the hydrangea, both lace cap and mophead, and behind them we have a yellow hypericum hedge that is planted on a bank and is kind of the backdrop for everything over this side of the garden. And this border over here in front of the glass house had a bit of a revamp in spring. I moved some of the grasses around and took out some plants that I didn't think were doing well. I have staked up the Alstroemeria. These are the Lig2 hybrids, the orange one here. They don't flower for as long as some of the other ones, but they do seed about, and I suppose that's a bonus. At this stage, probably not for me, but it was certainly a bonus in the beginning when I was you know, starting out with the garden. So I guess a good tip is that if you want lots more plants just to fill in gaps, then don't deadhead the likes of Hydrangeas or poppies or Alstroemeria ligdo hybrids if you have them, or even Linaria purpurea, which is the plant there on the right, because you're going to get plants popping up here, there and everywhere, aconite as well. But if you don't want that, then do deadhead. And over here we have my main day lily display, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. The one at the top there, the orange one, is Rocket City. The one we saw just a little while ago, it's doing well. But the red ones, the red day lilies, well, they're just not bothering to open this year. They really need more sun, I guess. Another great self-seeder is Lychnis coronaria, this plant here, and I have it everywhere in the garden, which is great because I just love the silver foliage and the magenta flowers. Another plant that's doing really well this year is Cornus cusa. I have 2 Cornus cusa trees in the garden and both are flowering for the longest time. And of course, it will come as no surprise that the hydrangeas are just loving the wet weather we've had this year. Now here we have an example of, well, I suppose this is to showcase the fact that my soil is acidic. So if you have acidic soil, your hydrangea macrophylla will be blue, and I have acidic soil. If you have alkaline soil, then they'll be pink. And that just applies to Hydrangea macrophylla. And here we have 2 examples of Hydrangea macrophylla that might look quite different from each other. There's the mop head, blue, and then there's the lace cap, which is, I mean, I suppose it's a bit more complex a flower. And I think they just look absolutely wonderful here together. Now we're going to go over to the other side of the garden. Just a quick glance here at my aeonium display. Speaking of bush-like salvia, this one is my absolute favourite. It has such a divine scent that just kind of permeates the whole section of the garden. And interestingly, if you pick one of the leaves and just squeeze it between your fingers and have a sniff, well, it also has a delicious scent, but a different delicious scent. And another tip for this time of year is to feed roses. So some of your roses will be finishing up flowering, and this particular one is Celeste. It's called Rosa Celeste. It's an Alba type rose, and if you're going to prune, you should prune after flowering. Now, the general information about Alba type roses is to minimally prune, but I find with this one, with Celeste, is a very vigorous rose. And this year what I found was that the metal support I put in to support it, it was so heavy that it was starting to come out and just lift it out of the ground, which I can't have. So I have actually pruned it back a bit just to reduce the weight. And that's something I know I can do with Rosa Celeste. I'm not sure if it applies to all Alba roses, but certainly to this. In any case, whether you are pruning or not, after the roses finish flowering, they really should have a good feed. And my fertiliser of choice is the one from Ocean Leaves. It's a seaweed fertiliser, and I just sprinkle a bit of it around the base of the rose, fork it in and water it well, and it helps my roses stay healthy and fight that dreaded black spot. I seem to have 3 water lilies this year, which is a good result for my small pond. By the way, I do notice that the pond seems to be losing water, and you can see that the plastic is visible in some places just up against the stones. And I was thinking maybe I haven't made up my mind yet, but maybe I'll get rid of the pond and just have it as a larger bog garden. I'm very pleased with how this penstemon is doing at the moment. Let me just get the stipa out of the way. This is one I grew from seed myself, and I really like its tall habit, although it does need a bit of staking, and its very striking colour. And we have cosmos in flower, which you saw already over the other side of the garden. Over here we have a froth of various pinks. We have the likeness that I showed you behind the glass house where it just self-seeded. We have the tall Diacia personata, and we have a lot of Sweet Williams, which were just put in here to fill gaps, but are colour coordinated beautifully. The Sarracenia are the yellow plants in the middle there in the large pot. And I'm just showing you here behind the bench. Now you'll recall that the bench is new and it went in, between last autumn and spring. And the result was that these roscoas, which were dormant at the time, couldn't be found to be moved, and I just didn't want to touch them because I'm very fond of my roscoas. I didn't want to take any chance in damaging them, so they got left, and the result is that they're quite a bit behind the bench, so they're kind of lost, so I will need to move them. But well, I'm very pleased just to see that they're coming back and flowering beautifully. And this, of course, is my favourite seating area in the whole garden over here in Josh's garden. And oh yeah, I was going to say this is the end of the video, but there is just one more small thing that I want to show you before we finish up. It's a project that I carried out this summer, and it was, well, you know, let's go and have a look. It's just over here. Okay, so the project I want to show you is just behind me. This is a section of the garden you don't see very often. Just there on the left is my beach cylinder, as I call it, and in there was Josh's garden. And what we're talking about now is this bank here behind me. No surprises why I haven't shown you this bank very much. So in the countryside in Ireland, it's common practice for builders to separate properties with a bank of earth. And it's very stony in my garden because it was originally, the site was originally cut out of a hill, so a stony bank in my case. And this poses certain strategic and planting problems for us gardeners. Now, in a very sunny location, it is okay to plant Persicaria, and I have planted Persicaria affinis, and it has done very well, but here it's more shady. And for years I had some grasses in here. Oh, just a mistake. I should never have planted them in the first instance. But anyway, you know, we learn from our mistakes. And this spring I took it upon myself to dig those grasses out and to cover the bank with a geranium. And this is a geranium that was propagated elsewhere in the garden. A rainy, dull summer is the perfect time to undertake a project like this, because the propagation will result in plants that have no roots, and they will need to be cared for very carefully, watered very carefully. And you know, that's easier to do when you don't have beating sun coming down on them, and well, we certainly haven't had beating sun this year. So the result is that 124 geranium plants were planted on this bank this summer, and I had help from a workawayer, Alexandra. She actually carried this out, and all she did was remove pieces from the geranium over the other side of the garden and just plant them here. And look what we got. Already we've got plants that are perking up and growing, indicating that they have finally made roots. So I'm very pleased with this result. Because these geraniums are planted on a hill, I don't want the water to run off. That's why stones have been placed underneath each and every geranium to kind of catch and dam up the water so it doesn't flow away. And I should have made a separate video about it, but I'm not exactly sure which geranium this is, so yeah. But try it out. If you have geraniums in your garden, perhaps you've got like geraniums that you got in a plant swap or given to you by somebody else, and if they have kind of the browny tubers, try breaking off a bit and just sticking it in the ground elsewhere and see if it grows. And then you'll know if you've got a very sturdy, robust geranium that perhaps you could carry out a project like this with. In any case, in a few years I expect these to fill in quite well and to clothe this ugly stony bank with green leaves at a minimum and flowers early on in the spring, because it's a geranium that likes shade. It tolerates shade very well and flowers reliably. So that's my story there. And okay, well, that brings me to the end of the video, and I hope that you found various bits and bobs in there of use to you in terms of what you're doing in your garden this summer, and that, I don't know, I mean, what are your stories of what has done well this year and what hasn't in this very, very wet summer. Of course, not all of you have had a very, very wet summer, and my heart does go out to those who are battling temperatures of 30 degrees plus. Yeah, what can I say? It's, you know, it's all flux, it's all change in terms of weather. Thank you as always for watching my video, and I hope you'll join me again soon for another one. Bye!